Okay.
Gentleman's time's expired. Let me clarify for the gentleman from Texas. We are working with the Committee of Jurisdiction over DOD, that's Armed Services, to get a document production, including the sniper photos that Tyler testified to, that he handed over to the commanding officer and the command center. In my opening statement, that has yet to be produced. We expect that to be produced. In addition, these two gentlemen are at a very high level. The COs on the ground are Admiral Vasely, General Donahue, and we have requested through HASC as well that they testify before the Congress. We will vigorously pursue this, and if we have to do it with a joint hearing, which has been done before, of armed services and foreign affairs, that is our plan, and we're not going to give up on this till we get the answers. And we do have a classified briefing, I want to say, after this. So I want to get through this. We have Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like you, my father was a World War II veteran. Dad was a Marine, and he told me the only thing generals ever gave him was a hard time. So I fully expect to get that from you all. You don't need to write that down, but that's just me personally. This is for either one of you.
Marine, World War II, and he said the same thing.
Do what?
That my father was a Marine in World War II with the 4th Marine Division.
That was 1st Marine Division. His colonel was Chesty Puller. So thank you. This is for either one of y'all. The Taliban was in violation of the Doha Agreement. Why did we remove our troops?
I think that's a question for policymakers, not for either of us.
So you all, I guess what I want to get at is y'all weren't involved in the consultation of that.
We absolutely were involved in the consultation, and we pointed out repeatedly that the conditions were not being met.
That's what I wanted to know. Can you explain why the arbitrary deadline of August 31st was chosen as the date of removal from Afghanistan? And was the State Department or Department of Defense the ones that chose this date?
Didn't choose the date, but I can tell you some of the logic and thinking that was going behind that. So the date of May 1st is the Doha Agreement. Right. This current administration, the Biden administration, comes into office on the 20th of January. And then the first week in February, actually, I think the first meeting is either the 3rd, 4th, or 5th or something like that. But the first week in February is the beginning of a 10-week deliberation that was quite rigorous, actually. Lots of meetings, lots of readers, et cetera, by the National Security Council to include the current president. And then the decision or the guidance to the State Department was to get additional time, work with the Taliban, postpone them 1 May. And I think the most that the State Department could get was, I think, whatever that is, 6 months, I think it is. And that then bounds your problem from time of decision, 14 April, not going to go with 1 May, and it takes you out X amount of days. I think it was whatever that is to the end of August, September. But that was the backstop, and that was because of negotiations between Zal Khalilzad and the Taliban as to how much he could push it to the right.
13 Americans, including my constituent, Staff Sergeant Ryan Knaus, and 170 Afghanis were killed at Abbey Gate. Do y'all consider this withdrawal a success?
Well, as I said in my opening statement, and I've previously said in several previous testimonies, I think the whole thing is a strategic failure. I've said that openly several different times. But at the same time, I want it really clear that the United States military did its job, and the United States military did what was asked of it, and that anyone who served in Afghanistan, or any family of the fallen, or any of the wounded, every single one of them did their job, did what bravery and courage could ask of. They did it with professionalism, they did it with dignity, they did it with courage, and they did it with compassion. So I believe the United States military executed its mission. And I think that they did so with great professionalism.
And my dad had another saying, I'm sure he stole it from somebody, but old men make decisions and young men die. And that is apparent. That's what happened here. And those old men being at the State Department. Would it have been better to choose a measure of operational success rather than a date when deciding y'all's date of withdrawal?
I think one of the lessons, if you want to call it a lesson, I suppose, is Don't put date certains on things like this, and don't announce them, and don't put date certains. That's basically, you lose whatever leverage you might have had if you're involved in some sort of
It
negotiation.
seems to me that we've never learned that lesson. We always announce these dates, and then whether it be Vietnam or some other debacle, and it just seems to always end the same way. General McKenzie, you're not getting enough airtime, so I want to ask you a question, if that's all right, brother. What was CENTCOM's official assessment of the ties between the Taliban and other terrorist organizations, and do you agree in hindsight with those assessments?
So I think we had a pretty consistent assessment that the Taliban was opposed to ISIS. They had theological disputes, and the Taliban, given an opportunity, would push ISIS out of Afghanistan. And they tried to do that on a couple of occasions, but had limited success. On the other hand, their ties with al-Qaeda were deep and profound, and there was no way, in my judgment, that they were ever going to separate from al-Qaeda. And so those are the two major organizations that you see operating in the region. So ISIS, yeah, given a choice, they'd just as soon be rid of them. Al-Qaeda, they're not going to take that action. Now today, ISIS-K probably is the more potent of the two threats, but it's difficult to project into the future.
All right, I've run out of time, but I'm just like to say to the families, I hope you all find some peace in your life, and I hope the Lord blesses you all. And thank you for the sacrifice. Mama lost her brother in the Second World War, and to the day she died, and they played that national anthem, she teared up. And I hope you all have some real peace in your life. So thank y'all. Mr. Chairman, apologize for going over.
Gentleman yields. Chair recognizes Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Milley, good to see you again. General McKenzie, I was looking over your long and distinguished careers, and what I noticed was you were both on active duty just before I left active duty. General Milley, you were promoted to first lieutenant in 18 months. I didn't get that lucky, and I wasn't that good. You said something, General Milley, that I think was profound. You, in fairness to the United States military, there were no military mistakes while under military command in this case. And that brings a couple of questions. First of all, both of you during the day have said we should see more, we should hear more, and so on. If I could point out something to see if you've seen it, they've distributed it to you. The question is, here's a public log that shows a vast amount of a video that I haven't seen. I've not been made aware of it. Some of it is redacted, but most of it you can read what it says. And the timelines are pretty pronounced. Do you believe that, I mean, obviously that exists. This was a FOIA. Have you, either one of you, seen any of these videos, and do you think we should see them on the committee as a whole? General McKenzie?
So I've probably seen most of these videos at one time or another. I should certainly see no reason why you shouldn't see them.
Okay, it won't surprise you, we haven't. So when we became aware of it, I wanted to ask. I want to point out 211, 214, 217, and 223, General McKenzie. Do you recognize those, and are they of particular significance? Also 212 and 213.
I read the title, I understand what it says. I just can't associate it with a video.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll see them. General Milley, during your career rising through the ranks, I had 4 careers. One of them was here in Congress. So I do want to correct one thing you said, which is very unusual for a nobody private or captain to do, but we do have the jurisdiction. And you said it very well in your own statement, and I'd like to point it out for the Gold Star families that are here. This committee could, all or in part, change the question of who is in charge, Title 10 or not, in the case of an armed withdrawal. We could decide whether the chief of mission continues to be accountable to somebody back in Foggy Bottom, or whether you would have been in the direct chain going back to the Pentagon. We could put primary responsibility on the amount of forces necessary in each and every, and General McKenzie, you know your Marines and what they do. You know how many more we have after Benghazi. You know what happened because of Benghazi and what General Amos did. So for the Gold Star families, this committee does have at least most of the jurisdiction to decide whether or not a State Department that in our own investigation clearly made decisions that were counter to the safety of Americans there, counter to the safety of our allies, but not necessarily counter to their own safety, although in fairness, the decision not to move the embassy either out of the country or to the military base instead certainly contributed. So, General, both of you, General, and look, I have nothing but respect for your service and for the tough situation you both found yourself in this withdrawal. But I'm going to ask you to basically answer as much of a yes or no as you can. If you had had the authority to determine the continued presence, would it have been dramatically different from a standpoint of safety of American personnel?
Good.
Let me make sure I understand the question. You're talking,
If you'd been told that we were withdrawing,
right,
would you have done it differently as a military man rather than the way it was done?
I would have begun sooner.
Would have
Much
begun sooner?
That's probably the principal thing I would have done. I would have begun much sooner than when we actually did.
And I would have, I would have brought the embassy and the State Department out with the military by the middle of July. That is what, if there was one thing, a do-over, you don't get do-overs in this stuff, but if there was a do-over, that would be it. And that point was debated and discussed and so on and so forth. But that is a, yes. To answer
Last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may just, if you had been given the opportunity to determine that you wanted Afghanistan to stay free and independent of the Taliban, would that have been possible during your chairmanship?
Well, I think that if you kept 2,500 as your men force, and it wasn't just any 2,500, this is a group of 2,500 that were very, very highly talented special forces. I think that group of 2,500, plus the NATO forces, plus the contractors, I believe to this day that the Afghan security forces and the Afghan government would not have collapsed. But I also believe, and I believe it would have happened, is that the war with the Taliban would have reopened. And that could have possibly meant another increase in forces. So if your purpose, the political strategic purpose made by policymakers is to withdraw, then the idea of keeping 2,500 with the possibility of even increasing is obviously at cross purposes.
So if I could surmise or summarize what you said, if we had had the same attitude in Afghanistan that we have till today in South Korea, that in fact, if there is an adverse combatant force that is unrelenting, you keep sufficient forces in order to prevent them from prevailing, even if it's more than half a century.
Well, I think that if your intent, your strategic intent is to prevent Afghanistan from becoming a platform for terrorism to strike the United States, and to do that, you've got a means, the government of Afghanistan, the Afghan security forces, and if you withdraw, they're going to collapse, then I think you either accept the risks of that collapse, and if you're going to do that and withdraw completely, then I agree 100% with what General McKenzie said earlier. You're going to have to withdraw quickly, fast. That includes your State Department folks, or make a decision to stay. It's a binary choice there. There's not a lot of gray in between. And I think that if you decide to stay, there's risks associated with that, and the likelihood that war again would start with the Taliban.
And the Marines
Gentleman's
concur
time
with
has
the Marines
expired.
concur with the Army in this case.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Miller Meeks is recognized.
Oh, I didn't realize. Thank
We've
you.
been keeping a 5-minute.
I thought it was done. I thought it was.
Okay.
I thought it was a
All right.
closing act, Chairman.
Go fuck yourself.
I'd like to thank Chairman McCall for the opportunity to waive on this hearing today, and to our witnesses
Thank
for
you for
testifying
skiff,
before
man.
the committee, and for the Gold Star families that are here. The reason I wanted to be here at this hearing is that I'm a 24-year military veteran, Vietnam era veteran. My brother served in Vietnam. My husband is a 30-year Vietnam era veteran as well. My father was career Air Force. 6 of his 8 children served in our military. The botched withdrawal from Afghanistan in August of 2021 was the single worst foreign policy disaster of the United States that has not been witnessed since the fall of Saigon. And I mentioned this at a Homeland Security hearing in June of that year. This completely preventable catastrophe resulted in the deaths of 13 U.S. service members, one of which, including Corporal Dagan Page, grew up in Red Oak, Iowa, and 170 Afghans. When President Biden took control of the White House, the world was at peace and our enemies on guard. Since the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan showed our weaknesses on the world stage, Russia has invaded Ukraine, China has dramatically increased its aggression in the South China Sea against Taiwan, and even the Philippines. Hamas has launched a horrific attack against Israel, and the Houthis are launching attacks in the Red Sea, openly attacking U.S. and allied service members in the Middle East. You both previously testified that you recommended maintaining a small force in Afghanistan instead of a full withdrawal. General Milley, you have also previously stated that the withdrawal was a strategic failure. Was it less problematic to defend Bagram Air Base than HKIA? And why was the decision made to give up Bagram Air Base, for which we could do counterterrorism and better to protect than in the middle of an urban area?
I'll let General McKenzie talk the specifics of Bagram, but Bagram was not a feasible course of action to keep open once a decision was made to withdraw U.S. forces below 2,500. And Frank can talk through the numbers, but to maintain security, to maintain Bagram as an open air base would have required a brigade combat team. You're looking at 5,000 plus a battalion to patrol the 30-mile road between Kabul and Bagram. So now you're looking at 6,000, and then you're still going to have to take care of HKIA, which in the end ended up being 6,000 Americans, 2,000 internationals and others, so about 8,000 for HKIA. So you're looking at 15, 20,000 people. If your strategic purpose is to withdraw from 2,500 to zero, it doesn't pass the common sense test to then increase to 15,000.
I'm going to reclaim
That's
my
the
time.
fundamental issue.
Can either of you provide U.S. intelligence? It was woefully inaccurate in predicting how quickly Afghanistan would fall to Taliban control. Was this willful neglect of the Biden administration, the State Department, if you advised them that their potential for a fall would be rapid?
We, the United States military, consistently indicated that there would be a likely collapse of the government and the ANSF upon a full withdrawal of the United States military. And we estimated that that would be months, not in August, months. We thought, at least I thought, it would be sometime in the late fall, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I extended that out to maybe spring, could get past Christmas and into spring. The intelligence community estimated anywhere between 12 and 24 months after the full withdrawal of the U.S. military.
And was there a recommendation to the Biden administration, the State Department, that there would be a strategic intent and benefit of keeping Bagram Air Base and troops within Afghanistan?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Was there a value to maintaining a presence in Afghanistan and Bagram Air Base?
Well, I thought that you'd have to have at least 2,500 if you're going to keep Bagram. So I thought, personally, I thought at the time, my assessment at the time, and I've said this publicly before, that keeping 2,500, the value was to buy time to achieve the conditions of Doha and a negotiated settlement between the Afghan government and Giroa. Presidents are in positions to make very difficult decisions. And I'm looking at this from a military standpoint. 2 presidents in a row, much wider angle of view, taking in much more factors than I do as a general. They both decided the same thing, just with different time.
Well, General Milley, with all due respect,
Yeah.
even as a nurse in the Army, I had to push back against majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels and generals who are recommending things that were in our patients, not in their best interest, and would have cost them their lives.
Right.
We expect to have pushback from the military when a State Department or a commander-in-chief is doing things that are not in the best interest of this country and in the best interest of our service men and women.
For many heated, lengthy
let me just
discussions and debates.
end here with recruitment
Lots of
down.
pushback.
Will we have to wait until November or January 2025 to finally get accountability for the disastrous
We have to go
incompetent
to a
withdrawal?
classified briefing. Please make this short. It's been a long day. Wrap up your question.
I'm sorry, I just did, Chairman. I just said, will we have to wait until November or January 2025 to finally get accountability for the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan? With that, I yield back. Thank you.
I'd like to recognize the ranking member for a closing statement.
Again, I want to thank former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and General Mark Milley, and former commander of the United States Central Command, General Kenneth McKenzie Jr., for testifying before Congress again and providing vital insight as this committee continues to use its oversight authority on Afghanistan, including its withdrawal, but including our oversight. Your testimony, I think, reinforces the need to have bipartisan, good faith oversight for our 20 years in Afghanistan. I believe that the American public and our service members and those Gold Star families, the 13 at Abbey Gate, but also there's over 2,461 that lost their lives at our 20 years, during our 20 years in Afghanistan. The American people deserves nothing less. And I would hope and I would join and I will say to those Gold Star families here whose hearts I really feel that I will stand on to make sure that we do the 20-year investigation so that we can get and find out what we did right, what we did wrong, for the benefit of everybody in our military. And I think in order to do that, we need to do it not in a political way, but in a bipartisan way. And clearly from the testimony of the generals here, it is investigating what took place during the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and the Biden administration. And then and only then will we be able to make that account to the American people in a thorough and non-political and bipartisan way. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank the ranking member. We did establish the Afghanistan War Commission on the National Defense Authorization, and it's a board of highly esteemed people, just like Ambassador Ryan Crocker, who knows these issues probably better than anybody. This is not a partisan group. I look forward to their recommendations. With respect to this investigation, we are focused on the evacuation. And so I do look forward to working with my friend on lessons learned and legislative recommendations to move forward to ensure that this never happens again. I think as we've heard today, it was the lack of a plan by the State Department and the failure to timely execute the plan that led to the chaos at HKIA and led to the suicide bomber, the Abbey Gate terror attack. That truth will come out. We will get the commanding officers before this committee, and we will get the production of the sniper photos that Tyler took, and we will get it soon. And so with that, we're going to stand in recess as we move to the classified space to have the classified portion of the briefing. I apologize if I was a little impatient. It's been a long day. I appreciate your patience, but we really need to get into the classified space before the votes. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.